Well, welcome to the Tony Robbins Podcast, Tony Robbins. It's nice to have you. I never imagined sitting in this seat across from you.
Well, it's great to be with both of you on this special podcast. I know it's a Father's Day podcast, and I know you guys are going to do the bulk of this because I guess that's what you promised. You did Mother's Day, right?
We did indeed.
And I love that one.
Yes, thank you. And on that podcast, we actually committed to, it just felt imbalanced to only do one perspective. And so thank you for joining us because we wanted to get from your eyes and your perspective. Obviously, we're not fathers.
Yeah, but you both have amazing fathers. Some present still, some present from a distance on the other side in Mary's case. But both your fathers have had a big impact on me as well.
And just getting a sense, Tone, like what does it mean to you to be a father?
Well, I think the father's job is one of the most important jobs on earth, other than a mother's probably. I think it's unique. Everyone has their own idea of what that looks like. I think the most important thing, if you're listening on Father's Day, first of all, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. I send you all my love because I know what that means, and I know we've all been shaped to some extent. And some people have been shaped because the father relationship was not a great one. Some people barely know their fathers. Some people have very harsh relationships with fathers. Some have very loving relationships. So some are close, some are distant. And I don't pretend to be an expert, but I do have the great privilege and blessing of being a father to five and a grandfather to five. So at least I have some experience on the job and at different stages of my life too, where I got several of my children all at once, which is a unique experience of life. But I think, the father role, as far as I'm concerned, it has two sides to it. Anyone can be a parent, anyone can have a child, but I think there's a difference between being a father and even being a dad, to me, in my world. A dad is a really beautiful and fun experience. A dad you can be the friend to your kids, but I think a father is someone who loves their child so much that you're willing to risk losing their love in the short term in order to serve them. And so I look at father to me as a position of love and strength, like absolute unconditional love beyond imagination, so that they know that no matter what happens in their life, you're always in their corner. But a strength to call to the higher part of any stage of a child's life, even I'm discovering now, even at the toddler stage, so that their life actually manifests into something that they're proud of and magnificent. It doesn't mean putting your approach to life or your tattoo on your child, because I don't think that's what a father does. I think a father is someone who's acutely aware of that each child has different gifts and each child needs a different kind of support and each child needs a different kind of challenge. And so being a warm, loving, strong father to me is a figure that's important. And it's not because, I've had so many great role models, as you know, honey,
Yes, you've had multiple fathers. And
yes.
Can you just share your own relationship and how that shaped you as a human being? There's many listeners out there that, possibly, have had challenges with their own father figure or lacking of a father figure. And you certainly had a unique constellation. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. That was very articulate.
This is fun.
This feels very formal.
She's very professional when you're on the show, Tony Robbins.
What have you done to her, Mary?
I'm sweating.
I think for those listening, some of you may know some of my history, but I don't go through bore everybody with the details. But I had a unique upbringing, and then I have a very powerful mother, very strong, very intense, and a huge part of who I am today was shaped by her. But I also had four different fathers. My natural father, who gave me the gift of life and of birth, along with my mother, I was never really super close to. I never really related to him as a father. He was a good man. He worked hard. And a lot of how I see him, I know, was probably shaped by my mother. And I think it's important for mothers out there to know what a role you play in seeing how the father's perceived.
That's so true.
In your case, Bonnie Pearl, I know, Sage, your daddy was not there a good period of the time, and you looked at it as he's working his butt off for the family. And I don't know how much your mom played a role in that. I think she did play a role, didn't she?
Hugely so. That her Absolutely. Her own narrative was, dad is really in service to the family. He's taking care of us. He's supporting from that perspective. So I didn't have that disjointed perspective that of his absence. It was interesting. I'd even mentioned it previously that, even though he did work a lot, his presence was always felt, and he was there when we needed him.
Yes.
He was present when we needed him.
Yes.
So I do believe that my mom's narrative on that definitely shaped my own perception of that reality. And that's a really valid point, Tony.
Because it can also be shaped positively. Sounds so funny have you call me Tony. You never call me Tony.
I don't, but we are on the Tony Robbins Podcast.
This is a real interview. Stop laughing, everyone.
I'm taking this officially then.
Order.
Tony.
Okay, Tone.
All right, sweetheart, I love you.
I love you too. Thank you.
No, but I think that's important to point out because my natural father was a parking attendant. He worked for 50 years underground. It was before, having little automated systems to, get your ticket. And he would take people's money, he'd sit there and read the newspaper and take people's money all day long. And my father was an alcoholic, but not a mean alcoholic in any way, my natural father. But there was just no relationship with him. He'd come home and he'd be drunk and he'd watch TV. He wasn't into sports. We did share, a love of history. I have a love of history. Maybe he planted that seed in me. I don't know, probably. And so that was the one thing we shared in common, but that was about it. I really couldn't tell you much about him. He was a very internal man. Wanted to be a movie star, was in the movie business.
No
That's
way.
how he and my mom met, I guess, and kind of B-movie situation. Didn't quite make that. But he was a good man, and he was a attractive man, but he wasn't a very strong man. And I think a huge part of who I became was to not be like that. And that's not trying to be disrespectful to me anyway, just trying to be honest as to how I think it shaped me. And again, I don't know that it's fair because it was a big part of through my mother's eyes. And when we had that moment, she said, "Who do you want to go with?" Well, I don't want to hurt my father's heart, but I wanted to be with my mother, so I didn't say anything. So she says, "Well, you obviously want to be with your father." So she got up and left with my little brother, 5 years younger, and my little sister, 7 years younger, and I was destroyed by it. And so that was kind of my path. And my mom actually fell in love with his cousin. It sounds like Peyton Place, doesn't it? And if you know what Peyton Place is, I think I just dated myself. But it
I have
sounds
no
like
idea what you're
soap
talking
opera.
about.
Soap opera. But anyway, the bottom line is they moved away and not too many far away. And I think I was shaped in the missing of my mother as well, missing of my brother and sister. And one night she came home, it was Christmas, and brought me a couple presents, and I was cleaning up everything. And afterwards she said, how'd you like to do this ongoing? And I said, does that mean come be with you? And she said, yes. And I went to be with my brother and sister. And so I moved to my second father. And his name was Art. And he was a completely different man. Also very internal. He was good with his hands and smart. But again, no real relationship, no emotional connection. He beat me pretty good physically and took over from my mom, so to speak, in that area. And but he wasn't mean about it. He just did his job, basically what he was told to do. But there was no substance. So if you have a father that you didn't have any connection with, for most of my young life, I didn't have one either. But so that lasted for a few years, and then there was a blank period with no one, and I got to meet the man she married before I was born. And his name was Bob, and he was more entrepreneurial. And he owned a gym and was a really nice guy and was a pilot and gave me a sense of aspiration, like what you could become, but not a lot of interaction. But I really liked him. It was the first one I had some interaction with, but it was very brief. And then very quickly she met Jim Robbins, who adopted me and who I loved dearly. He was a semi-pro baseball player who now is working, in computer chip kind of sales type of thing. And he was a character. They called him TJ. He looked like Tom Jones, which at the time was a very big singer and figure in those days. And he and my mom were both very eclectic, crazy people. They'd go out and turn heads. They'd be crazy, and they fought like crazy, intensely. I mean, saying things and yelling things and throwing things and breaking things. And we lived in a tiny little house. And my mom, had her own room, and we were in a 1,200 square foot house with 5 of us. My father had to live in the living room. And so it's really, you get a sense how strong my mother was. And my father was not a weak man. But he introduced me to sports, which I always wanted to do. My mom was always afraid I was so small, believe it or not. I was the littlest guy always. And she was afraid I was going to get hurt. Jim Robbins came into my life, I think, when I was 13 or 14 years old. So I was a little behind the area, but he would hit me ground balls, hundreds of them for hours in the middle of the heat. And it was no good. I'd get hit in the face and I'd start bleeding. It was, come on, Tone, show me some moxie. And I loved him so much. I think I had some of that in me, but it certainly magnified it. And I'm so grateful because my strength of being able to push through no matter what, it was magnified by Jim Robbins. And so he was aspirational to me. He was a larger than life figure. He was a very cool person in so many ways. But also, had his difficulties. He had 2 daughters that he went through divorce and never spoke to again. And I could never understand that. And it just kind of crushed my heart. But he was from south side of Chicago and came home one day when he was a young boy and his mother's head was in the oven and killed herself. So you begin to, I had to become a kind of a psychologist at a young age, understanding all these dynamics between people I love most and why there was such conflict and why there was such pain. And it made me decide that someday I would be an outstanding father. And I look at that role not just in what I do with my children, as you know.
Yes.
I look at that in what I have the privilege to do for a living.
We think you're a pretty amazing dad, don't we?
You certainly are, Tom.
All right.
It's really beautiful. I just want to mention one thing that I'm so struck by listening to you right now is the fact that a lot of times our, deepest connections, they aren't necessarily always a biological family. Listening to you, how you describe your last father, Jim, and the impact he had on you. He wasn't your blood father. And so for those of you that are listening and, maybe you're adopted or from a foster family or, your father wasn't absent, I think what I just take away just listening to you is, individuals in an unexpected time and place and role can affect us in a really meaningful way. So thank you for sharing that.
I can see how you got a little bit from all those gentlemen.
I agree.
The entrepreneurial aspect, the moxie, the dashing good looks, whatever it was from those men, we're grateful to them all for making you, you. Tony, I want to ask you, and I think this, you're touching on this a little bit here, and some people listening might not know this, but before you go on stage, you ask for a little checklist of reminders. And one of the things you ask us to put at the top, you're very specific. The first thing on there every time is just the 2 words, warm father. And I'm just wondering if you could tell me even, and all those listening, what does that mean to you? It must be really important for you to put it right at the top there of all the things you have to remember over 6 days of something. Why that? What does that mean?
Because it's, to me, the most important role that you can play for someone. One of them, anyway. I can't be a warm mother. Maybe I could. Maybe I do sometimes. I certainly have both feminine and masculine in me. But I look at it as that's somebody who is completely unselfish. I'm not there for them to give me accolades. I'm not there so that I do a good job and they acknowledge me. I don't give a shit about that. Excuse my French, but you know me well enough. No, I'm there to serve. But I'm also there to serve even if it's hard. Not just when it's easy. To me, again, that's the difference between father and dad. And again, I love the dad role. Everybody does. But the father role, I think, is almost more important because not many people take it on because it's not a comfortable role. It's a role of leadership. Leaders are always liked, but they're inevitably loved if they've really served you. And so I put it there because I say warm father too, because you can come across as an intense father, even though that's not what you meant to be, because I am a passionate, intense guy. So I want people to feel that warmth, and I want them to feel that love of a father, even if we're peers in age. And I also use brother as my metaphor as well. Mm-hmm. But there's a higher responsibility in father to me than brother. I don't know if it makes sense to you guys, but it does to me. I hope it does to some of the men out there and or people that play a father role.
Tony, you've been a father since you were 24 years old. And now we share a 14-month-old. I'm curious, what has this little one opened in you, taught you? How is it different today?
Gosh, it's different in so many ways, honey. First of all, when I was 24, I instantly became a father of many because I married to a woman at the time who had 3 children, and she had them from 2 different husbands. And she wasn't living with them. And I could see she wasn't happy. And I was like, okay, bring all the kids. And I fell in love with them and adopted them into my life. So instantly, all of a sudden, there were 4 kids and they were in every age group. And her eldest son, I barely got to know because he was already 17 and I was only 24, 25. So that was interesting, But, the others were, 11 and 5. And then my first birth child coming into the world at that stage. So it's like, wow, here I am to try to change the world, and all of a sudden there's all these kids here, and they were from different fathers. It's like, this is like a complex world, but love can penetrate all that. Love can, solve all that. And so I fell in love with each of them, and they're all unique and they're all different. And I did my very best, and I'm proud of the father that I was. I learned a lot along the way. But, at the age of 61, having, now 62, but when she was born 61, having our daughter together, the three of us, which was such a unique experience to have her have two moms that love her completely and have all the life experience I have today. It was even greater than I had hoped for or dreamed for. There was a stage of life where it's like, honey, I said to you, I don't have a kid past 50. I don't want to show up at their high school graduation and be 70 years old. Now I'm going to be 80. So I got, I wrote Life Force. Thank God I wrote that at this stage, because I need to make sure I live past 100 here so I can be around for her 40th birthday. But the level of joy I have today is so different. And I think I've always looked at each of the kids. I think you have to look at your children as not you and not try to shape them to be you. But I did have certain thoughts and expectations about what they needed to do, how they needed to be still, even without that. And I think it's very different now. I'm much more in delight of the witness of what God has presented to us in this beautiful little soul, who she already is. Because I don't have to travel as much as I was in those days, I'm here for all those moments, her first little steps, her first words of dad, mama, and all those things. And so I get the experience of being a witness to what God put there before we did any conditioning or programming or educating or anything. To me, that's what it is. So what she's done for me is give me another level explosion of love in our life, which I didn't think there'd be more than what we already share in our family here. And she's given me a chance to renew and look at life through her eyes, which are very special eyes. When she's out there meeting people, they'll see she's one of those people when somebody comes to the house and she stares in their eyes for like 20 minutes and doesn't break. She freaks people out. She's like this little Buddha. And but her presence is extraordinary. And I know every parent thinks their kid is amazing, and I'm sure there's some of that that's going on here. But I don't know. It's a long answer to say she's a gift. And what's different today for me is I have more to give. And what's different is I'm not forcing those gifts. I'm witnessing and appreciating and shaping where the shaping maybe perceives to be valuable. But I want to make sure this young woman feels loved beyond compare, but also has a sense of responsibility to life, that I'm here not just to get things, I'm here to give things. And if we accomplish just those two things in our daughter, between the three of us, I think we'll have done something really beautiful for her life, and most importantly, the lives that she'll touch in whatever form that is, whatever gift she brings to this world.
Well, if her consciousness has invited your witness to be here now and take in more of the grace of her isness, I think that's really beautiful for you, Tone. So
thank you. You slowed me down too.
That's what I mean. I was just going to say, I think for you to be able to appreciate and to admire and to watch her unfold, and to watch her flower. I know from my own perspective, there's nothing more beautiful.
I agree,
and I
honey.
see that in you. I watch you just noticing and appreciating, and I think that's ever so lovely. And thanks for sharing, Tone. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm grateful beyond compare. And all you fathers out there, and I don't know if you're hard on yourself or not. Most men are hard on themselves. Women may not know that, but most men are hard on themselves. As hard as you think you can be on a man, most men of any sense of responsibility and have any child are hard on themselves. Some of them try to hide it. Some trying to push it away because they don't know how to deal with it. But I'd say to you, wherever you are, pick yourself up and decide what you want to be now. How do you want to be as a dad now? And if you're not a dad right now, is there someone who needs your brotherhood or your fatherhood, needs your mentoring? Because every one of us has lessons. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be a certain way. Everyone who's lived a life has had life experiences that are worth sharing if they're coming from a place of not trying to teach, but they're coming from a place to try to love and serve and just share. I think most men live lives where they don't share as deeply as maybe some women do sometimes. That may be too big a generalization, it probably is. But I would say as an overall generalization, men keep their emotions closer, but they understand and they can share other perspectives. And that's all I think we can offer each other as brothers, as men, as fathers on the path. And for your children, you're going to screw up. No, there are no professional parents. That's why I'm in the business I'm in, and help people at a later stage of life to turn that around. But be kind to yourself, and most importantly, when you make a mistake, own it and go to the next level. Find what's next and keep educating yourself. We're doing that even at this stage of life again, reading books, figuring out everything we can, finding out what we believe. There's so many points of view about parenting. But I hope this conversation has been stimulating of you in some way. And I know the ladies are going to take it from here and share with you a woman's perspective, because both of them have extraordinary fathers that have shaped them powerfully. So thanks for letting me appear on the Tony Robbins podcast. Sage Robbins. And
you could talk to our
Mary.
assistant and see if they do the scheduling, if you might be able to come. We'd love to have you back. Maybe we can make this a regular thing.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Tone.
Love to you.
Love to you.
So here we are coming up on Father's Day, and we would like to send some flowers and some homage and some respect and admiration for father energy, because we are lucky we sure love our dads. You know, Tony often says, if I want you to think about your father, all I have to do is talk about mine. So I would love to ask you, and to start, Sage, by saying, you sure have an awesome dad.
I certainly do. My daddy, my pops is legit.
He sure is.
He is just a real embodiment of such character and integrity and absoluteness. And as much as he has strength, he has such a tender heart. He's so dear. And, his presence, even though as we were growing up through life, he worked multiple jobs supporting the family. And even if he wasn't physically present, my father's presence was always felt. One of the things I enjoy and so appreciate about my daddy is I can walk into a room and we can just make eye contact and no words even exchanged, and there's so much said in that space. Even today I called and I was like, hey, Pops. And he's like, hey, sweetheart, how you doing? And he's like, here's your mother. That's it.
He's a strong silent type, your dad.
He is.
In fact, some of my sisters met him at a seminar one time. They sat next to him for like 4 days and he didn't say too much. In fact, my sister said, we weren't sure if he could talk. Yeah, he can. He just chooses not to often.
And yet there's such a wisdom in that space, And like I said, even though he might not be prolific in his speaking, he is in his heart communication and that silence. He offers so much. And he's just a beautiful man, a beautiful presence, a beautiful example in my life, in our family's life, and in all those he touches.
That's right. And you speak to this wholeness and this harmony that is within all of us. So again, I just want to stress this one more time, that it's the yin and yang, whatever words you want to put to it. But these are undeniably within all of us on some spectrum, sliding scale, however you see it, that we have access to in moments when we need it. And if the feminine is traditionally this cyclical thing, the masculine is traditionally this linear, it's structured, it brings order. So, Sage, I ask you, do you feel yourself, we're just new mothers. Tony this is the first little baby that you and Tony have together that we are experiencing in life right now. We're seeing Tony as a father of a little child for the first time. Tony Robbins is a phenomena. Anybody who's listening is a fan of his, I would guess. And he is such a force. What can you tell folks, though, about who shows up here at home when this little baby crawls into the room?
Well, Tony is definitely, he is a force of nature and has a vast embodiment and expression of masculine energy and all those attributes that we just described. And beautifully, he's probably one of the most tender-hearted, in tune, sensitive, connected men that I've ever met. He's such a softie. He's the first one to cry in movies or watching a commercial, or if he's reading, maybe somebody, writes a letter of gratitude or something of how his path or his work or his mission has impacted somebody. Tony will be sitting there weeping. I mean, he has that beautiful sensitivity. It's actually one of the things I love about him is he has like extremes, and then there's the extreme of the masculine, extreme of this access to this sensitivity and feminine energy, and yet in that middle point, what I consider to be Tone, just the guy that's here in this home, that's a father, his love and care and sensitivity and service.
Sometimes fathers get locked into that perspective of like tyrannical father, but there's this kind, benevolent, protective, loving, warm father that we can't forget about, and that's what we're trying to honor and bring attention to also today.
If I think of one of the beautiful gifts of the masculine is because, a lot of times it's portrayed as something else. A lot of times in society, it can be portrayed as, dominance or possessiveness or, you know what I mean? More that
aggression warrior, but that's aggression. One facet of it only.
Well, it's just like, in both perspectives, there's unconscious parts, in both perspectives, can be unconscious or conscious. And I think one of the beautiful aspects of the masculine is actually the servitude to his beloveds, to his family, to his community. And watching Tone at this stage of his life, father, and love our little one it's just such a sweet space. It's such a unexpected tenderness, and yet not unexpected, because I experienced that with my own father. That strength and that juxtaposition of strength and sweetness, strength and tenderness. I think it's such a beautiful portrayal. And a lot of times as human beings, we can get locked, or out of balance would be probably more accurate. Throughout my own life, in my 20s and 30s, I was out of balance in what probably I perceived feminine energy to be. It was an external expression, it was more...
Out of balance, maybe another way to say it is overdependence on one stripe.
Yes.
Okay.
And I can look back at that version of myself and have such sweet compassion for her. And then in my 30s into my 40s, as I stepped more into business, then it was almost an overdominance at times of more masculine energy, and which felt new and alive and powerful. And yet when I recognize with inside myself, or even with inside Tony, or even my own father, it's that middle ground, of not this or that, but both perspectives. I think what was so beautiful by a lot of individuals, a lot of men specifically that listened to our previous conversation about motherhood, was them recognizing that energy within inside themselves. And you and I spoke about this, and it just felt the freedom that it gives. That it's like, gosh, this isn't gender dependent. And any great warrior, that has a lot of that yang energy. So beautiful at a stage of life. I think that's the gift probably of age, is a lot of times wisdom starts to drop in, and I can relate to that inside my own self as well. More of a balance and integration of the two rather than a this or that. And contextually, I think life at times calls out different attributes or different parts.
It certainly does. One other lesson that Tony often brings to the forefront at seminars is he'll ask this question: whose love did you crave? Your mother's or your father's? And he says, of course, we all want both our parents' love, but there's one that we really long for and strived for. And then the follow-up question is usually, who did you have to be for your father? So I ask you that question, and I hope everyone listening also puts a little think into this themselves. Whose love did you crave, and who did you have to be? And if you're not from a 2-parent household, there's a caretaker in your life, whoever that may be, and there was someone that you were trying to please as a child. And how does that show up in adulthood, and how does that carry out, just so people can frame how they think of fathers and the shaping of their lives. Sage.
Well, my father gave me a great freedom to be and express who I am, no matter what that looked like, and a beautiful acceptance of that. You know, one of the traits or experiences that I referenced as you know, from my father growing up, as I've mentioned before, he was in AA, or he is in AA, and he always put his cards on the table, the good, the bad, the indifferent, his misses, maybe things that, you know, one may hide. You know, my dad was always so transparent. And, you know, what's so beautiful is, you know, those experiences were laughed about, and he shared, you know, he had been there, done that in his life, but there was a beautiful admission of truth that I think, you know, through the path of AA, that created a container of transparency.
And room to grow.
And that's exactly, room to grow.
Yeah.
And the recognition that, gosh, we all evolve, you know. And so that gave... I never recognized it back then, but at this stage of my life, I really recognized that, gosh, that gave me permission. And it's not that we need permission, but to take a look and see, like, I can look back at myself 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and I wouldn't make the same decisions, you know, that today, because, you know, every day we're here to grow and evolve. And the example of that really had such a huge impact on me. And I think that's also what's so beautiful as we're speaking about father, mother, is, you know, a lot of times innocently we can fix them who we believe them to be, you know, who we believe they were as a child.
When you say fix them, I want to clarify for listeners too. You mean like we kind of get them stuck. Like if you were to take a freeze frame or a Polaroid picture and we fix them, as in, that's it. We take this little snapshot, this little finite picture of them, and then that becomes all they ever are, or all they ever were, or all they ever will be.
Yes.
And you so beautifully have taught me this lesson. You know, in my own life, my dad passed away 20 years ago, pretty suddenly. He went out to play golf one day, like he always did, waved goodbye, said, "Mom, I'll be home for dinner," and had a heart attack. And that was it. And so, of course, losing my dad at 23 years old, I think certainly I struggled after that with questions like so many people who either never had a dad, or their dad either left or was absent or died. You know, there's so many symbolic stories of people searching for this lost father figure in their life and struggling with still pleasing their dad, even whether they're there or not.
Yes.
And you and Tony have done a lot of work with me personally. I've seen you do it in seminars, and that's always beautiful to watch people heal these relationships with father and mother. But I do want to say personally, for me, it's just been one of the greatest gifts, maybe the greatest gift that you guys have given to me, is that you've helped me see my father, and you've put those words to it, like, well, there's this guy, like. It's in how Sage talks about these stickies or Post-it notes that we put all over people, especially to our mom and dad. Maybe we just have one that's like dad, and we have all these expectations of what, you know, this idealized father should be. And then there's this guy who's just doing the best he can that became a dad. And I know it sounds so simple, but it's all, until you kind of broke that down for me, it's true. I know that I picture this guy who, like, I'm one of 6 kids. He had 6 kids. Mm-hmm. I just think about the guy that's there. Like, now that we're parents too, I sometimes have the feeling like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm somebody's mom. Mm-hmm. And so I would imagine that there is feelings like people often say you don't get a manual, an owner's manual. And when you become a parent, you just, we feel into these things and we have to figure it out. And so my takeaway, and I urge anyone listening, 2 things really. 1, I don't have to say it, but I will. You never know when your parents are going to leave your life. If you're lucky enough to have them right now, I know it's personal and close to home for me, but I'll just say, like, they could be there and you could say, see you later, and they could be gone. Mm-hmm. So if there's anything that you would wish you had tidied up if you knew they were going to be gone, I say, do it. And you taught me that too. And I've cleaned up even the relationship with my mother, because I know that fact of life to be true. Like it's it's not a given. Tomorrow's not a given. It could be taken away so fast. And then, man, like these people that gave us life, mom and dad, can you explain how, like the lesson that you gave me there about the guy, the person, what can you say to people listening to just help them see with fresh eyes like you did for me, for my mom and my dad?
Wow. Maybe you're giving me a lot of credit, and I don't know that I gave you anything. You really gave it to yourself by starting to notice. I think, one of the most beautiful things, Mare, is how close your daddy is here now. There's so many times of moments where I always know when you're referencing your father about how you light up and how alive he is with you. And just your willingness to see a broader perspective of him, to understand or experience a broader perspective of him, even though he's gone. I'm so struck by how alive he is in your life. And you do that. You do that by honoring him. You do that by, whether it's, whether you're golfing or making a dish or something, you always share the narrative, gosh, my dad used to do this and he did it this way. And it always strikes me how alive he is here now. And I just have to share that because, a lot of times for those of us that have lost loved ones, we believe that, they're completely gone. And I think it's so beautiful how you've navigated that, but also how you've expanded that within your own heart and mind to include not just the father, but the husband, the guy, the brother, and understanding him from different perspectives. I think that's probably one of the most beautiful gifts, because through identity, no different than, the identity of father or the identity of mother, we have unconscious expectations of that, or believe that they should be a certain way or behave a certain way. And they're just human beings like you and I doing the best they can. Yeah. You know what I mean? We're all in this experience together. And, you'd mentioned Byron Katie's metaphor about stickies. And, it's through life as we have impressions, or as we, have beautiful moments or painful moments, we can put stickies over the person, over the individual in our own mind. And it's like, we come to a point where we actually aren't even seeing or recognizing who they are anymore. And so I think life is really, an opportunity to come back home and to be open to perceive more accurately who these beautiful human beings that God gave us to love.
Yes.
And I have been moved by how you've navigated that with your own father, and how, the awakeness that life can change in a moment, and that it's so precious and we have no clue what tomorrow is going to bring, never mind an hour from now.
I am grateful for the lessons that you taught me. And I'm also aware that there's also kind of a natural trajectory that all humans, if there's life cycles that we all pass through in this lifetime, childhood, young adult, maturity, elder. And through that, who you are is almost always the opposite of how you were raised, because this universal thing is every generation kind of declares war on their parents. And there's this push away. It's part of our journey and our, the hero's journey or the heroine's journey. You push away from your mom and dad. And then I think if you're lucky and wise and you grow out of some things and strip away some ego, you come back to realizing, wow, you come back to that mom and dad that you once swore off and tried to go in every other direction. So I know that there is a natural ebb and flow to this relationship. And I just love to hear more input from you about that push away and return. And what can you give if anybody is having any kind of strained relationship out there with their dad or mom or anyone?
Well, life is so kind because it gives us an opportunity to see life differently, see life from a kinder lens. And, I think there's resistance and push. I'll speak for myself is, as a younger version in my teens, it's like, I'm not that. but it's just ego mind of having resistance and judgment of what we believe, maybe somebody projecting their, philosophy or way of life. And we resist that because we don't have enough life experience to actually know, because so much, it's like, even listening to yourself, Mary, it's like now that you're a mom, and it's like you relate to your parents differently. Once you're married, once you have children, it's like, oh my gosh, all the things that I said I would never do, all the things I'd said I would never be. I
tucked my shirt in the other day and I was like, oh my gosh, I've become my father.
But that's so beautiful. That's the beautiful cycle of life. And, it's always there. That was always there and available. But through my own, immaturity or resistance of wanting to be, my own identity, whatever that means. You push and you pull and then you surrender and accept and actually recognize. I think for myself, it was the recognition that, gosh, we're not so different. Like they're going through this human experience just like I am. And I think that that's where the innocent or the ignorance of, believing that, they're supposed to do something for me because they're my mother, because they're my father. And it's like, oh my gosh, like what a gift to have them. What a gift that God blessed me with their presence, with all the lessons, all the gifts, good, bad, and indifferent, and then just seeing them for who they are today, that's an opportunity for wholeness for ourselves, never mind for them. And sometimes, as human beings, we want it to look different. And when we want it to look different, we miss the gift of what life is offering us here and now. And I think that's through life experience, pain, loss, gifts, all of it. And maturity is the appreciation of, wow, these really beautiful souls that, helped to co-create and bring me into existence.
Right. And this also goes back to, and maybe this is something to end on, something to think about when Tony talks about beliefs that shape our entire world and our model of the world. And one kind of beliefs are global beliefs, and those are big, overarching generalizations that we make. An example of global beliefs are men are, women are, mothers are, fathers are. So I invite you listening to see what you believe about some of those words and see if that's most accurate, if there's something that's as true or truer about big swaths of human beings like men or fathers, and see if it's your own stuff coming up, if you're living and believing out of a place of old wounds, and what could you make room for today as you evolve and grow. And so does your definition that you put to those categories of humans.
If we're externally demonizing something outside of ourselves, whether it be men or in women, we can't, well, not that we can't, because we can, but we're really, therefore, making then that energy wrong inside of ourselves. And there's gifts of both energies and how they express and how they animate. And there's blind spots to both energies as well. And I think when you recognize that, there's just a compassion. There's just a compassion to know that, gosh, we are here to evolve. We are here to grow. We are here, and life gives us an opportunity to see life through a broader lens and to have more inclusiveness within. Therefore, we're able to have more inclusiveness on the external world as well.
That's right.
I've been blessed with amazing men and women in my life. But, part of, I was actually walking in here today as I was getting ready and just thinking of these beautiful men that I have around me, and they express and animate differently. And I think that's also such an interesting juxtaposition. I have these amazing men, Tony somebody might perceive him to be that type of warrior type energy. My father, similar, a dear friend, Billy Beck, my brother, all these really very, what people would perceive externally as masculine men, and also very in tune and sensitive. And yet I have beautiful men in my life, beautiful gay men in my life, that bring and express within inside themselves that those energy, the access of energy, and how that expresses and animates through them. And then the meeting point of those two men, sometimes, I'll watch Tony with some of the men in our inner world, and the dynamic and the beauty of them mirroring And, I think it's just so gorgeous because really a lot of times it's that mirrorship. It's what the other hasn't claimed with inside oneself,
Yep.
And I think it's such a beautiful perspective. Tony, many people can project because he comes in this big 6'7", stature.
Gorilla suit.
And the unexpectedness of how life expresses as him. And I always say he's the most masculine and the most feminine male I've ever met. And Tony, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry, but it's the truth.
He'd admit it.
I'll share another moment. A very dear friend of mine who's a gay man, he had said that when Tony hugged him, he hugged him without a filter. He hugged him without a holdback. And he said like he had never been held in that way, not by his own father. And he said how deeply healing that was for him. That, a lot of times, straight men or masculine straight men, that they won't, express that love if a man is gay. And he said like, when Tony hugged me in that picture, afterwards he wept because he felt so healed by that expression. And I'm just saying that because, we can all lock ourselves in this, identity of what it means to be a woman or a man, whatever that means, because we're spiritual beings here having a human experience. And, life isn't as narrow as sometimes we perceive it to be. It's so much kinder and broader. And when we allow that freedom inside of ourselves and within others to just be who we are, life is kind.
All these things that are alive within us, balancing energies. Our work is never done.
Our work is never done. I just wanted to say thank you to all the men, all the brothers on this path in my own life. I'm ever so grateful for your presence and the gift that you bring to me and my beloveds. Thank you. And blessings to those on all you fathers out there for Father's Day, whether you're a brother, whether you're an uncle, whether you're a big brother, a foster parent, whether you're a mentor or a coach in a sports team or such things. Just, bless you for your presence and know that your presence makes a difference to those around you. Thank you and happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. My big brothers. I have to give a little special shout out to my two big brothers.
Mine too.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining, everybody. We look forward to our next conversation and time together.
See you next time.
God bless.